Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Economics of Sports. Today, we're going to be talking about the NCAA. The NCAA is a cartel. That was the readings for this module. So let's just start thinking about the NCAA, how they drive revenue, what their expenses are, the economics of this not-for-profit entity. All right. So when we think of college sports, right, there's two tiers of competition. The first tier, recreational, intramural sports, club sports, those kind of things, where widespread participation, frat against frat, dorm against dorm, that kind of stuff. You see here, playing out there, not too formal, some rules in place, but overall, it's just, for fun. But then there's the second tier of competition, right? This is intercollegiate sports among universities, right? Two universities. Sanctioned by a governing body. In most cases, the NCAA for our purposes, but there's also other governing bodies out there, the NAIA and the NJCCA. But, just so for our purposes, the NCAA is the one we're going to be focusing on. And we're talking about this, right? This kind of stuff, right? Where 100,000 people come out to a Michigan football game on a Saturday afternoon to watch them play Ohio State or whoever it is, right? There's a lot of revenue being generated. There's a lot of economic impact being had here at this kind of event. All right. So in the U.S., just so we know, we have 4,700 colleges or universities, over 200 million students. Of those 4,700 colleges and universities, about a quarter, 1,150 are voluntary members of the NCAA. Right? You don't have to be a member of the NCAA. It's a voluntary organization. If you choose to, you can be part of the organization. St. John's is part of it. We choose to be. All right. You don't have to be. The NCAA is the largest governing body of intercollegiate athletics. Has jurisdiction over 500,000 student athletes. All right, over 500,000 student athletes. Think about that. That's a lot of students participating in NCAA college sports. The NCAA, just for our purposes, established March 31st, 1906, not for profit. Right? It's a not-for-profit organization. It's voluntary, like I said. You do not need to be a member. It is a private organization. This helps with this economic impact. It is a private organization, not responsible to the government. Not owned or not responsible for the government. That's important. That'll be on the quiz. All right. The NCAA's mission, our purpose is to govern competition in a fair. Yeah, whatever. I mean, that's their mission. Is that really what they do? They want an equitable and sportsmanlike manner and not to integrate collegiate athletics into higher education so that the educational experience of the student athlete is paramount, right? The educational experience of the student athlete is paramount to the NCAA. It's hard to do when you're playing, road games 2-3 times a week, but it is what it is. Governance of the NCAA, new president, Charlie Baker. But it's mostly governed by the universities, the presidents and chancellors of the member institutions, the universities that make up the NCAA, with a lot of power coming from the Power 5 conferences, right? They have the largest seat at the table, so to speak. And that's because they have more voting rights, right? For every vote for a non-Power 5 conference school, they have one vote. The Power 5 conferences get five votes. Okay, so they get a lot of power, right? The NCAA's role in intercollegiate sport basically established initially, for rules on the playing field. This changed over the course of time to rules regarding recruitment, financial aid, academic performance of the student athlete, and also to solidify this concept of amateurism. We're not really going to get into it in this class, this concept, but just be aware that this concept of amateurism is paramount and is the crux of the economic structure for the NCAA. All right. So the NCAA, as we know, 3 different divisions, right? The first, Division 1, which we are part of here at St. John's, 351 member institutions. In order to be a D1 school, you have to offer a maximum of 14 sports at your college or university. Limited 7 for men, 7 for women. And you have to offer the scholarships in accordance with those sports. All right. If you want to be an FBS school, though, you have to have a minimum of 16 sports, at least 8 men, 8 women. You could have more. You can always have more, but that's the minimum you could have. Right now, about 130 colleges or universities in the U.S. are part of the FBS. D2, right? You can offer athletic scholarships, limited though, as compared to D1, and you have to offer at least 10 sports, 5 for men, 5 for women. Those skills are often smaller, part-time coaching staff, those kind of things. Division 3, which is most of the NCAA, 443 member institutions, no athletic scholarships. The athletes kind of play for the love of the game, that kind of stuff. They're not getting any financial reward directly for participating in sport. And as you can see here, D1, D2, D3, most of the athletes are at D3, lot are at D1, 15,000 in men's football, men's basketball about 5,500. All right. Each division again then is divided into each additional conferences. Right. D1 is dominated by the Power 5 conferences: the Southeast Conference, the Big 10, ACC, Big 12, and Pac-10. And the Power 5 conferences have schools like Duke, Texas, Ohio State, Alabama, Stanford, all those big time schools that we're talking about. All right. In D1, most student athletes are recruited by their coaches, but there are strict rules regarding recruitment. Right, and these rules are limit the number and length of benefits that can be offered to these recruits. Again, economically keeping what you can. The NCAA economically keeps what the NCAA member institutions can provide for the recruits. And we're going to get into a little bit down the road, right? Yeah, the student athletes, if they're recruited and the coach wants them and the school wants them, they're offered an athletic scholarship, or what we call grant and aid. But these are limited, right? These are limited by the NCAA. The NCAA says you can only offer so many scholarships per sport. 85 for football, 13 for basketball, that kind of thing. The schools have to therefore divide or partial up their scholarships to get enough athletes to compete for their teams. And typically these scholarships are 1 year renewable. All right, they're 1 year renewable, meaning that they have to be renewed at the end of the year by the university. If the university doesn't want to keep that student athlete, they don't have to. They don't have to renew their scholarship. All right. So, interestingly enough, so the NCAA says you can provide scholarships, but they limit the number of scholarships. So look at baseball. Right. Baseball average roster size about 36. You can offer 11.7 scholarships. Well, how are you going to field a team? That kind of thing. Basketball. Average roster size about 16, 13 scholarships. Football, 85 scholarships. Average roster size about 121. So men's soccer always cracks me up. They need 29 on the team. You could offer 9.9 scholarships. Okay, all right, but that's a way that the NCAA can control the economics of this, right? Once a student athlete is offered a scholarship, they have to sign a national letter of intent. Don't worry about it. It's revocable for the school. It's not revocable for the athlete. All right. Most of the time, the scholarships include cost of tuition, whatever that is at that university, and room and board. Right? Usually cost of tuition and room and board. Nothing else. Right? Kind of changed with one of the cases that's been filed, one legal cases, Alston and O'Bannon. Now member institutions have to offer an additional stipend above and beyond the cost of tuition and room and board. They also have to pay what they call cost of attendance. All right, computers, supplies, books, and other tangible items for that student athlete to succeed in the classroom. Okay, in the classroom. So note that for the quiz, what a student athlete scholarship includes. Typically includes tuition, room and board, number 2, and number 3, cost of attendance. And cost of attendance meaning, any supplies for the student athlete to succeed in the classroom. Okay, we're going to skip over that. College athletes are prohibited from offering anything else to the student athletes. This changed a little bit. Now players are free to negotiate endorsement contracts, name, image, and likeness. We're not going to talk about that today. NIL deals are paid by third parties, not the NCAA. All right, NIL deals are paid by a third party. The money for those NIL deals doesn't come from the school, college, or university, or the NCAA. Let's skip over that. All right, let's get to good stuff, right? The revenue generated by the NCAA and the NCAA member institutions. The first layer All right, usually D1 schools generate revenue same way as professional sports do, right? From ticket sales, gate, what we call gate, parking concessions, sponsorships, merchandise and licensing, media rights. Right? These are the typical ways that a D1 school generates revenue. But what's interesting about D1 schools or colleges and universities, they have a second way of generating revenue that is different from professional sports. And that is through donations. All right, donations. All right, boosters, alum, they can give back to the school, and they can give back specifically to the sports program or to the athletic department. Or they can say, this goes for football scholarships or whatever it is. All right, but they can earmark that money. I'm going to give a donation back to my college, and it's going to go to the athletic department. All right, so this doesn't happen on the professional levels, but it does happen on the college level. Second layer of revenue. Right, the NCAA itself, right? We talked about this, right? They maximize TV revenue, especially for March Madness. We kind of talked about that already. Men's basketball tournament, March Madness, even as in tournament, it's roughly $1 billion a year that the NCAA is making through the television rights through 2032. And that's not the only TV media rights that are sold at the college level. The BCS games, right? They contract with the ESPN. It's for 12 years, about $475 million per year, $5.6 billion over 12 years. Third layer of revenue, conferences and some individual schools have their own media right deals. They have their own deals, right? The Southeast Conference, the SEC, received $627 million for the broadcasting rights, selling their broadcasting rights to ESPN, CBS, and their own networks. This is interesting because it's about $43 million per school per year. With a new deal beginning in 2024, that'll bump that up to about $70 million per school per year. That's a lot of money from TV revenue. All right. So, is the NCAA the cartel? Right? How do you define cartel? An organization which makes decisions collectively on behalf of a group of otherwise independent organizations. Like any cartel, all members agree to abide by certain rules. This means that the cartel operates like a monopoly rather than a member competing against each other. So that's going to be a question on the quiz. Is the NCAA a cartel? Is it an organization that makes decisions collectively? I would think so. I mean, they're for its member institutions. And are they a monopoly? We're going to need to think about that, right? We really need to think, are they a monopoly? There are other governing bodies out there, but do they have the power and the money that the NCAA has, right? And so let's think about that's going to be a question on the quiz. Is the NCAA a cartel? So think about that. We also need to think when we talk about economics, yeah, they generate revenue. That's great. But there's also expenses associated with college sports. Right, and those expenses are similar, again, to professional sports, right? You have to pay for the labor. You have to pay for the coaches, trainers, administrators, everybody involved. Facility management, improvements, putting new grass, new courts, all that kind of stuff. Game day cost. Where college athletics is a little different, they also bear the cost of scholarships awarded to the student athletes. Okay, so there's a cost with doing business. But are these costs, and I always argue this on the economic side, are these costs inflated? Are these costs inflated? And because of that inflation, does it allow the NCAA and member institutions to do things that a regular business wouldn't be allowed to do? Right, and the three ways I think these costs are expenses. These costs are inflated. One, through extraordinary facilities. Two, through coaches' salaries. And three, the bowl system itself, and within football, there's very little accountability and very little transparency. Right, so I may ask that on the quiz. Are the college sports expenses inflated? And how would they be? Well, facilities, coaches' salaries, and lack of accountability or no transparency. Right? Expenses, right? These facilities, they're nice. Right? College facilities, they got it going on over here. Right? LSU, Notre Dame, these are